In early June of 1942, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly under a pale sky, vast and indifferent, concealing beneath its calm surface a convergence of fleets, ambitions, and calculations that would determine the direction of the war in the Pacific. And although the world did not yet know it, although newspapers could not print it and radios could not announce it, a silent contest of intelligence, timing, and nerve was already underway long before the first aircraft lifted from a carrier deck. Only 6 months had passed since Pearl Harbor. Only 6 months since the United States had watched its Pacific Fleet burn in photographs that traveled across the country like a wound that refused to close. And during those months, Japan had advanced with remarkable speed, capturing territory across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, building a defensive perimeter that seemed almost untouchable, while many observers quietly wondered whether the United States, still mobilizing its industry and training its forces, could possibly recover in time to stop the momentum. Yet inside a modest building in Hawaii, far from the roar of engines and the thunder of bombs, American cryptanalysts sat hunched over intercepted radio messages, piecing together fragments of coded Japanese communications, attempting to anticipate not only where the next strike would land, but whether the United States could seize the initiative before it was too late. And in that tension between uncertainty and decision lay the true beginning of the Battle of Midway. What if the next Japanese target could be predicted? And what if the prediction required acting before absolute certainty was possible? Because war, as leaders quickly discover, rarely offers perfect clarity. And in June 1942, Admiral Chester Nimitz faced a decision that would demand not only strategic judgment, but trust and intelligence that was impressive yet incomplete, persuasive yet not flawless. And he understood that if he committed his remaining carriers to the wrong stretch of ocean, the United States might lose the very tools it needed to fight back. Midway, a small atoll northwest of Hawaii, hardly seemed the center of the world. And yet in those early summer days it became precisely that, because whoever controlled it would shape the next phase of the Pacific War, and whoever misjudged the moment would pay a price that could not easily be reversed. The Japanese plan was ambitious, layered, and built on confidence earned from months of rapid success, as Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto sought to draw out the remaining American carriers into a decisive engagement near Midway, believing that by destroying them he could eliminate the primary threat to Japan's naval dominance and compel the United States to reconsider its long-term commitment to the war. But while Japanese forces prepared their operation with meticulous planning, American codebreakers at Station HYPO in Pearl Harbor were deciphering enough of Japan's naval code to identify a looming offensive against a target referred to only as AF. And although they strongly suspected that AF meant Midway, suspicion alone was not enough to justify risking the fleet. So they devised a test both simple and ingenious, instructing Midway to transmit an uncoded message reporting a failure in its water distillation system. And when Japanese intercepts soon mentioned that AF was experiencing water shortages, the final piece of confirmation fell into place, transforming analysis into actionable intelligence and shifting the element of surprise in a way that few outside that room could fully appreciate. Admiral Nimitz now faced a choice that history would later examine with admiration, but that, at the time, felt anything but comfortable, because committing his carriers meant exposing them to potential annihilation if the intelligence proved incomplete, and yet failing to act meant surrendering initiative and allowing Japan to dictate the tempo of the war. Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, hastily repaired after damage at the Battle of the Coral Sea, restored to operational status through relentless labor by shipyard crews who worked around the clock, welding steel, patching systems, reinforcing bulkheads with a sense of urgency that bordered on desperation, understanding that every hour saved might influence the outcome of a battle not yet begun. By late May, the American carriers were moving into position northeast of Midway, hidden by distance and radio silence, waiting in the vastness of the Pacific for a fleet that did not yet know it was walking into an ambush shaped not by chance, but by information carefully gathered and cautiously trusted. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, Japanese aircraft launched first, striking Midway Island in an attempt to neutralize its airfields and defenses, and although damage was inflicted, the base remained operational, forcing Japanese commanders into a complex decision regarding whether to prepare a second strike against the island or to rearm aircraft for a possible naval engagement should American carriers be nearby. It was during this moment of recalibration, while bombs were exchanged for torpedoes and fuel lines connected aircraft to the deck in a choreography both precise and vulnerable, that American forces began arriving in fragmented waves, not yet coordinated into a single decisive blow, but pressing forward with determination despite uncertainty. Torpedo squadrons from the American carriers attacked first, flying low and slow against a well-defended fleet, facing intense resistance and achieving little immediate success. And while their efforts did not yield the destructive results commanders might have hoped for, they forced Japanese combat air patrols downward and disrupted defensive formations at a critical moment. High above, separated by altitude and timing, American dive bombers struggled to locate the Japanese fleet, fuel gauges ticking downward as pilots scanned the horizon for a target that seemed almost invisible within the immensity of the ocean, until a chance sighting of a lone destroyer racing to rejoin the main formation provided the clue they needed, guiding them toward the carriers that represented the heart of Japan's striking power. What followed unfolded in minutes that would echo across decades of military analysis, as dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown descended upon Japanese carriers, whose decks were crowded with aircraft being refueled and rearmed, striking Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu in rapid succession, igniting fires that halted flight operations and shattered the coherence of the attack plan that had seemed so formidable only hours earlier. Hiryu, the fourth carrier, managed to launch a counterstrike that damaged Yorktown, demonstrating that the outcome was not inevitable and that the battle still hung in balance. Yet later that afternoon, American aircraft located and struck Hiryu as well, leaving all four of Japan's frontline carriers fatally damaged and altering the strategic equation of the Pacific War in a way few had predicted so swiftly. The loss of four experienced carriers and, perhaps more significantly, the trained aircrews who had formed the backbone of Japan's naval aviation arm, created a gap that could not easily be filled, because while ships could be constructed with sufficient industrial capacity, the experience required to coordinate complex carrier operations under combat conditions demanded time, training, and operational continuity that were suddenly disrupted. For the United States, Midway did not end the war, nor did it eliminate the immense challenges that lay ahead across the Pacific, but it shifted initiative, halted further Japanese expansion toward Hawaii, and provided a psychological and strategic boost at a moment when confidence was still fragile and outcomes still uncertain. Naval warfare itself had evolved before the eyes of those who participated, confirming that aircraft carriers, not battleships, now dominated maritime strategy, as opposing fleets engaged without ever sighting each other directly, projecting power across hundreds of miles through aircraft launched from moving platforms whose survival depended on reconnaissance, timing, and the delicate balance between offense and defense. Historians would later describe Midway as a turning point, yet at the time it was experienced by participants as a convergence of exhaustion, tension, and relief, as pilots returned to decks unsure of what had been accomplished, as commanders assessed incomplete reports through the fog of war, and as intelligence officers realized that their long hours decoding encrypted messages had helped shape events far beyond the confines of their offices. It was not a miracle in the mystical sense, though some would use that word, but rather a demonstration of how preparation, analysis, and decisive leadership can intersect at precisely the moment when hesitation would prove fatal and overconfidence equally dangerous. The Battle of Midway stands as a reminder that history often pivots not on overwhelming force alone, but on the quieter elements that precede it, on the willingness to trust careful analysis, to act before absolute certainty, and to accept risk in pursuit of strategic clarity. Because had Nimitz doubted his intelligence or delayed his decision, the Pacific might have unfolded along a far different trajectory. In the vast expanse of the ocean, where distance obscures intention and time compresses into minutes that determine outcomes, Midway revealed that preparation can transform vulnerability into advantage, that information can outweigh numbers, and that leadership under uncertainty defines not only battles, but eras. Perhaps the enduring lesson is this: when faced with incomplete knowledge and immense consequence, do we wait for perfect certainty, or do we act with informed courage? understanding that history rarely grants the comfort of absolute proof before demanding a decision?